How can a father be gone for years, and everyone still acts like he never mattered? Why did my stepmom insist there was nothing to find, then panic the moment I asked for military records for a VA loan? What I heard in that office changed my whole timeline. My name is Aaron Cole. I am 46 now. I work as a safety supervisor at a warehouse on the edge of town. It is not a fancy job. It is steady. It pays the bills. I show up early. I check the floor. I walk the aisles. I look for blocked exits, loose cords, leaking pallets, and things people step over when they are tired. I am quiet at work. Some people think quiet means weak. For a long time, I let them think that because my job is to keep people moving, not to win arguments. Most mornings start the same. The lights buzz, the air smells like cardboard and dust. Forklifts beep in the distance. My clipboard has the same checklist. I do not rush it. When you rush safety, you miss small things that become big things later. I stop by the loading dock and point out a strap that is frayed. I ask for a replacement. A younger supervisor rolls his eyes like I am slowing his whole day down. He talks louder than me, so people look at him first. He tells the crew to keep going. I stand there and wait until he gets tired of my silence. Then he changes the strap anyway. In the break room, I sit at the same corner table. I drink plain coffee. I eat the same lunch most days. It is not exciting, but it is calm. A few coworkers talk about their families like it is a contest. They talk about new houses, big holidays, and fathers who taught them how to fix things. I do not join in. I keep my eyes on my food. A guy named Trent likes to tease people. He is friendly in the way that still leaves a bruise. He asks why I never bring anyone to the company picnic. I tell him I keep my life simple. He laughs and says I must not have anyone left. Then he says it like it is a fact that I have no family anyway, because my father walked away and left nothing behind. When Trent says it, a couple of people nod like they already heard it somewhere. That is the part that gets under my skin, even when I do not show it. It is not just a joke. It is a story that follows me. I have heard it in different rooms for most of my adult life. It is always the same shape. My father was gone in 2008. People say it like it explains everything. They say he left nothing behind. They say his name is not worth much. And because I share his name, I get treated like I came from nothing and should accept less. I learned a long time ago that fighting a story head-on only feeds it, so I keep my voice low. I keep my face neutral. I tell Trent that I am here to work, not to perform. He shrugs and turns back to his phone. Someone else asks what I did over the weekend. I say I worked on paperwork. That part is true. I have been trying to buy a small home, nothing big, just a quiet place with a small yard where I can sit after work and hear nothing but wind. Rent has been climbing. My lease feels like a rope that keeps tightening. I want something that is mine. A friend of mine, Mara Jensen, is a realtor. She is practical. She does not push. She helps people who do not have a lot of time to waste. She told me I was ready as long as I stayed patient. She helped me find a small place near my job. It is older, but clean. The roof is not new, but it is solid. The neighborhood is quiet. I can see myself there. When I told Mara I wanted to use a VA loan if I could, she said it might be possible, but it would depend on documents and eligibility. That is how I ended up in the bank mortgage office on a Tuesday afternoon, still wearing my work boots. The bank lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and printer ink. A small tree sat in a pot by the window, leaning toward the light. The loan officer was polite and fast. He looked at my pay stubs, my credit report, and the numbers on a screen. He said my income was steady. He said my debt was low. He said I was a good candidate for a basic loan. Then he asked about the VA option, and his tone changed into a careful voice, like he was stepping onto a narrow bridge. He explained that the VA process could be smooth, but it needed the right paperwork. He asked for proof linked to my family name and military service history. He did not accuse me of anything. He simply said the system needs what it needs. He slid a checklist across the desk and tapped one line with his pen. It was the line about military records. He told me I might need my father's service information, depending on how my eligibility was being verified. He said I could request records, but it might take time, so I should start right away. I nodded. I took the checklist. I kept my face calm. Inside, I felt something old tighten. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was a familiar pressure, like a door closing in a hallway I thought was open. The moment my father's name entered the room, my life always got smaller. That was the pattern since 2008. It did not matter if I was in a workplace, a bank, or a friend's kitchen. The story followed me. On the drive home, I did not play music. I kept both hands on the wheel. I thought about the last time I asked for anything connected to my father. I was 19 then. I had just finished school, and I was trying to figure out what came next. My stepmother, Linda, had made it clear that the house was hers now. She had her own children, Kyle and Brianna. They were younger than me. She was building a new version of the family, and I did not fit in it. I learned to keep my requests small. I learned to keep them rare. I pulled into my apartment parking lot and sat in my car for a minute. My building is plain. The hallway smells like old paint. The locks are cheap. It is not a place that makes you proud, but it is a place that holds you. I went inside and put my bank folder on the kitchen table. I stared at the checklist. It was simple. It was normal. Yet my stomach felt like it did when I was 19 and standing on a porch with my bags. I decided to do the most basic thing. I decided to call Linda and ask for my father's service details, just enough to request the records properly. I did not want to fight. I did not want a lecture. I wanted a name, a date, a branch, anything that would help me move forward. I dialed her number with the same careful feeling you have when you touch a hot pan you cannot see. Linda answered with a tone that sounded busy. I told her who it was. I said I was working on a home loan and the bank asked for records. I said I needed information about my father's service so I could request it. I kept my words simple and slow. There was a pause. Then Linda spoke like she was correcting a child. She told me there was nothing to get. She told me my father left nothing behind. She told me I was wasting time. She asked why I kept trying to pull up old things that never helped me. I stayed calm. I said I was not asking for money. I said I was not asking for a place in her house. I said I was asking for basic information because a bank needed it. Linda's voice sharpened. She told me to stop digging. She told me not to involve her. She said my father was not the kind of man people should build their lives around, and I should not act like his name could open doors for me. She said I was better off accepting reality and moving on. I did not argue. I said I understood she did not want to help. I asked one more time if she could at least tell me the branch and the years. She refused again. Then she ended the call quickly, like she had won something. The line went silent, and I stared at my phone in my hand. I did not feel surprised. I felt tired. There is a special kind of tired that comes from hearing the same message for decades, in different voices, in different rooms. I set the phone down and opened my bank folder again. I read the checklist. I took a pen and wrote my own notes on the side. I wrote down the bank officer's name. I wrote down the date. I wrote down what I needed to request. Then I opened my laptop and searched for the public way to request military records. I did not do anything dramatic. I simply began. If I could not get help from Linda, I would use the process that exists for people who do not have anyone to hand them papers. Later that night, I went back to work in my mind. I thought about Trent's comment in the break room and how easily he said it. I thought about the nods from the others, like the story was common knowledge. I thought about how Linda spoke, like she was the final authority on my father's life and my life. Then I looked around my apartment. There were no family photos on the walls, no framed holidays, just a clock, a cheap couch, and a stack of bills in a neat pile. I realized something simple. The story had been running so long that even I had been living inside it. I picked up my phone again, not to call Linda back, but to look at my calendar. I added a reminder for the next morning. Start records request, follow the bank list, keep everything organized. When I saved it, my phone buzzed right away. Linda's name appeared on the screen again, like she had been watching the moment I moved. I stared at it while it rang, and I let it stop on its own. In the weeks after that bank visit, I kept thinking about how easily Linda shut me down. It was not only the refusal, it was the way she spoke, like the story was already settled and my questions were a kind of rude noise. That story did not start in my adult life. It started in 2008, when I was still a teenager and the ground under our home shifted. Back then, my father was still in the house most mornings. He was not loud. He moved with a steady rhythm. He made coffee, checked the mailbox, and left notes on the counter when he had to go early. He was not the kind of man who made speeches. He did small things that kept the house running. If a door hinge squeaked, he fixed it. If the yard light went out, he replaced it. I did not understand that stability is something you only notice when it disappears. Linda was in our home as my father's second wife. People in town liked her. She smiled at the right moments. She talked to neighbors with that warm voice that made them feel included. She also watched everything. She kept track of what people owed her and what she could use later. At the time, I did not have words for it. I just knew I felt tense when she walked into a room. When my father was gone, it happened in a way that left no space for questions. One day he was part of our routine, and then he was not. Linda moved fast after that. She told people my father had left nothing behind. She told them there was nothing to discuss. She told them it was better not to bother her with details. When neighbors asked how I was doing, Linda answered for me. She said I was fine. She said I understood. She said I was moving on. Inside the home, she shifted from being a spouse to being a manager. She controlled access to everything. She changed the way rooms were used. She moved my father's items into boxes and carried them to a locked space like it was simple cleaning. I remember standing at the hallway edge watching her do it. I did not know what I was allowed to touch. I did not know what was mine to keep. Linda spoke with a calm certainty that made me feel like I had no rights in my own house. Kyle and Brianna were younger than me. They were Linda's children. Kyle was always loud, even as a kid. He learned quickly that loud gets attention. He learned he could say things and people would laugh because they wanted him to be confident. Brianna watched and copied. She did not start fights, but she learned how to step to the safe side of power. Linda started calling the house our home in a way that did not include me. It was a small word change, but it had weight. She talked about plans and repairs and the future with Kyle and Brianna at the table. If I walked in, the conversation would pause. Then she would continue, but in a softer tone, like I was a guest who might be confused. I tried to keep my head down. I did chores without being asked. I stayed out of the way. I thought if I was helpful, I could earn my place. That was my teenage logic. Linda did not reward that. She used it. She would thank me in front of other people, then later tell me I did not do it right. She would say I was old enough to know better. She would say I was lucky she was patient with me. When I looked back years later, I realized she was building a record in her own mind, a record where she was the provider and I was the problem. At 18, I started asking questions in small ways. I asked where my father's papers were. Linda said there were no papers worth keeping. I asked if there was any record of his service. She said it did not matter. I asked about the house and whether my name was connected to anything. Linda said I had no reason to worry about that. She said I should focus on becoming independent because that is what real men do. She said my father never became the man he needed to be, and I should learn from that. By 19, the tension turned into a decision. It was not a sudden shouting scene. It was controlled. Linda picked a day when Kyle was home and Brianna was sitting on the couch with her phone. She told me we needed to talk. She said I was old enough to live on my own. She said she could not keep supporting a grown man who had no direction. She said my attitude was bringing stress into the home. She said the house needed peace. I remember standing in the living room, looking at the family photos on the wall. My father's face was not there anymore. The photos had been replaced with newer ones where he did not exist. Linda told me I could take my clothes and a few personal things. She told me anything else was house property. She said I did not contribute to those items. She said I did not earn them. She said my father left nothing behind, so there was nothing for me to claim. Then she said my father was pathetic, and I was headed the same way if I did not move. Kyle sat there like it was entertainment. He smirked and asked where I was going to go. He said I could not even handle my own life. Brianna did not say much. She looked down, then looked at Linda like she was checking what expression was safe. Linda told me she was not being cruel. She said she was teaching me responsibility. She said I would thank her one day. I packed what I could in a few bags. I did not have a plan. I had a small amount of cash and a part-time job. I left without making a scene because I did not want to give Linda a reason to act like I was unstable. I remember walking down the porch steps and hearing the front door lock. That sound stayed with me for years. It was not only a lock, it was the moment I understood I was outside a story I did not control. The next few months were a blur of short-term fixes. I stayed on a friend's couch for a while. Then I stayed with a coworker from my part-time job. Then I rented a room in a house where no one asked questions. I worked long hours. I took extra shifts. I learned how to be invisible in other people's spaces. I kept my bags packed because I never wanted to be caught off guard again. When people in town asked Linda about me, she made it sound like I left by choice. She said I wanted freedom. She said I was stubborn. She said I did not respect her rules. She used words like tough love, and people accepted it because they wanted a simple reason. A teenager leaving home can be framed as rebellion, and that makes other adults feel safe. It means the system worked. It means they do not have to look closer. I tried to talk to a few relatives on my father's side. Most of them were polite but distant. They said they did not want to get in the middle. They said Linda was handling things. They said it was complicated. They repeated the same line Linda used. My father left nothing behind. They said it like it was a fact written in stone. I started to wonder if I was wrong to question it. That is what long pressure does to you. It makes you doubt your own memory. Over time, I built my life without them. I worked warehouse jobs, delivery jobs, and maintenance jobs. I took night courses when I could afford it. I kept my spending low. I kept my circle small. I avoided drama because drama costs money and time. I became the kind of man who pays bills early and keeps receipts. I did not become flashy. I became stable. That stability should have been enough. Yet the old story kept showing up in little ways. A coworker would ask if my parents were proud of me. A neighbor would ask if I had siblings. A new friend would find my last name familiar and say they knew Linda. And Linda always spoke about how hard she worked after my father was gone. People did not mean harm, but the result was the same. My father became a shadow used as a warning, and I became the almost man who came from that shadow. I did not talk about it much. When you share your pain with the wrong people, they use it as gossip. I learned to keep it simple. If someone asked about family, I said it was complicated. If someone pressed, I said I handled my own life. That worked until the bank checklist put my father's name back in my hands like a weight I could not set down. After Linda ended that call, I did not feel a dramatic emotion. I felt a kind of clean focus. I realized something important. Linda did not refuse because she did not know. She refused because she did know. If there truly was nothing, she would not care. She would laugh and tell me to waste my time. But she did not laugh. She shut the door fast. That difference mattered. So I started rebuilding the timeline in my mind from 2008 to now. I remembered how quickly locks changed. I remembered how fast my father's items vanished from view. I remembered how Linda spoke to adults in town, always one step ahead. I remembered the way relatives avoided details, like they were repeating a line they were taught. I began to see the pattern as a system, not a series of random events. I did not know what I would find yet. I did not even know if I was allowed to find anything. All I knew was that I could not keep living under a story that someone else wrote for me. I could not keep letting my father be reduced to a rumor used to control my place in the world, and I could not keep accepting that nothing left behind was the final answer, just because Linda said it with confidence. 2 Saturdays after my call with Linda, I went to a family event that I usually avoided. It was at a community hall on the other side of town. Linda liked that place because it looked clean in photos. It had bright lights, white tablecloths, and a small stage with a microphone. The event was for a cousin on Linda's side. It was not my cousin. I was not invited because anyone wanted me there. I was invited because Linda liked to look generous. I told myself I would stay for 1 hour. I would greet people, eat a small plate, and leave without trouble. That was my plan. I parked far away and walked in with my hands empty. I did not want to carry a gift bag and have someone make it a joke. Inside, the room was already loud. People hugged and laughed. A playlist played soft music in the background. Linda stood near the front like she owned the room. She wore a bright smile that looked practiced. She saw me, scanned me from head to toe, and then looked away like I was late, not welcome. Kyle was there too. He was 34 now, but he still moved like a teenager who wanted attention. He wore a fitted jacket and talked with his hands. People listened to him because he spoke with confidence, even when he was saying nothing important. Brianna stood near him with a drink and a calm face. She looked older than I remembered. She also looked careful. I walked up to Linda first. I kept my shoulders relaxed. I told her I was glad to see everyone celebrating. I told her I hoped the day went smoothly. Linda answered with a polite tone and a tight smile. She told me to find a seat and not get in the way of the photos. She said it like she was giving instructions to staff, not family. I moved to the side and looked for an empty chair. A few people glanced at me and then looked away. One older relative nodded, but did not approach. A woman I barely knew asked if I still lived nearby. I said yes. She asked if I had a family of my own. I said I lived alone. Her expression changed for a second, like she did not know what to do with that answer. A few minutes later, Kyle walked up with 2 younger men I did not recognize. He put his arm around one of them and talked like he was giving a tour. When he reached me, he did not greet me like a brother. He spoke louder and introduced me like I was a strange guest connected by accident. He told them I was Linda's husband's older son. He said I was the quiet one who came around once in a while. One of the men laughed like it was a joke. Kyle smiled and kept talking. He said I was always busy trying to prove something. He said I still acted like I had a claim to the family name, even though our father had been gone a long time. He said our father left nothing, so there was nothing to chase. He said it like he was doing everyone a favor by explaining me. I kept my face calm. I nodded once. I did not correct him. I did not defend myself. In a room like that, correcting him would have turned into a scene, and Kyle loved scenes. I said I was there to celebrate the cousin, and I hoped everyone had a good time. Kyle looked disappointed that I did not react. He shrugged and walked away, already looking for his next audience. I sat down at a table near the back. The chair legs scraped on the floor. I kept my hands folded. I watched how Linda moved around the room. She greeted people like a host. She laughed at the right times. She made sure the right people were seen near her in photos. She acted like she was the center of everything good in that family. When the food was served, I took a small plate. I ate slowly. I listened more than I spoke. I heard pieces of the old story in different voices. Someone mentioned how hard Linda had it after 2008. Someone said Linda was strong for holding everything together. Someone said it was good that Kyle stepped up for the family. I did not hear my father's name said with warmth. I heard it used like a closed chapter. I heard it used like a warning. After the meal, a toast started. People gathered closer to the stage. Kyle ended up near the microphone, smiling like he might grab it if he could. Linda stood front and center. I stayed near the back. The person giving the toast spoke about family, loyalty, and showing up for each other. People clapped. Linda clapped a little louder than most. Kyle clapped and looked around to see who was watching. In that moment, I understood something simple. Their version of family was a performance. It was not built on truth. It was built on control and applause. I left before the next round of photos. I walked out without saying goodbye. My car was still parked far away. The night air felt cooler than the hall. My shoulders relaxed as soon as the door closed behind me. I sat in the driver's seat and held the steering wheel for a moment. I did not feel rage. I felt clarity. The same people who kept telling me to move on were still using my father's absence as a tool. They did not want me to heal. They wanted me to stay small. On the drive home, I made one decision. I decided I was done asking Linda for permission. I decided I would build my own timeline and find the truth through systems that do not care about her smile. The next day, I went to the public library. It was quiet inside, with soft lighting and rows of shelves. The air smelled like paper and dust. I picked a table near the back where no one would bother me. I brought a notebook, a pen, and my laptop. I did not come in with a big plan. I came in with a simple goal. I wanted dates, not opinions. I started by writing the year 2008 at the top of the page. Under it, I wrote what I remembered. I wrote the month my father was gone. I wrote the week Linda changed the locks. I wrote the day she told me my father left nothing. Then I added my own life events. The month I turned 19, the week I left the house, the first job I worked full-time, the first apartment I rented on my own. As I wrote, the story stopped feeling like fog. It started feeling like a sequence. And sequences can be checked. I searched for local news archives and community posts from around that time. I did not expect to find much. I mostly expected silence. But even silence can be useful. If something big happened and no one talked about it, that tells you something too. I kept notes in plain language. I did not write dramatic words. I wrote facts and questions. I wrote possible leads. If I found an address connected to my father, I wrote it down. If I saw a mention of a unit reunion or veteran event in town, I wrote it down. None of it was proof yet. It was just a map. After 2 hours, I took a break and went outside with a bottle of water. I looked at my phone. I had a message in the family group chat. It was from Linda. She was thanking everyone for coming and praising Kyle for helping her with the event. She added a line about how some people show up for attention, not love, and how it was important to protect the family from that kind of behavior. She did not name me. She did not need to. Everyone knew who she meant. That was her method. She did not attack directly. She shaped the room against you and let the room do the rest. I saved the message. I did not reply. I made a folder on my phone and labeled it by year. I started putting screenshots there, not because I wanted drama, but because I wanted a clean record of patterns. That evening, back at my apartment, I looked again at the envelope I had found in my old box. I had been carrying it in my bag like a weight. I told myself I was not afraid to open it. I just did not want another emotional mess. But the truth was, it felt like the last thing my father left for me, and I did not want to treat it like junk mail. I opened it carefully at the kitchen table. Inside was not money or official papers. It was simple. It looked like a small note and a contact card that had faded with age. The note was short. It did not explain everything. It also did not sound like a man who left nothing. It sounded like a man who knew the world could twist stories. I read it twice and set it down. Then I picked up my phone and searched the name on the card. I did not find an easy answer, but I found enough to confirm it was not random. I wrote the name in my notebook. I wrote another question mark next to it. The next day during lunch, I stepped outside my workplace to make a call. I had been thinking about my father's sister, Carol. I had not spoken to her in a long time. She was one of the few relatives who never sounded happy repeating Linda's lines. She sounded cautious, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing, but she never sounded proud of what happened to me. Carol answered on the second ring. Her voice was older, but steady. I told her it was me. There was a pause, then she said my name in a way that sounded like relief and worry at the same time. I told her I was trying to buy a home. I told her the bank needed records. I told her Linda refused to help. I kept my words calm. I did not accuse. I just stated facts. Carol listened. Then she asked if I was safe. I told her I was fine. She asked if Linda was giving me trouble again. I told her Linda was being Linda. Carol sighed and said she had always hated how that house turned into a stage. She said she did not like how my father's name became something people avoided. I asked Carol if she knew anything about my father's service. I asked if there were papers, a box, anything that might have been kept. Carol got quiet. Then she said she remembered my father being very careful about his records. She said he kept certain things separate. She said he once told her that if anything happened, he wanted things handled through official channels, not family arguments. I asked her if she knew where those things were. Carol said she did not know. She said Linda moved fast, and after that, people stopped asking questions because it was easier to accept Linda's version. She said she regretted that. She said she should have checked on me more. Her voice broke slightly, but she pulled it back together. I told Carol I was not calling to blame her. I told her I was calling because I needed a path forward. Carol said she would think. She said she might know someone who served with my father, or someone who knew the right office to contact. She told me to keep everything in writing, keep dates, and stay calm. She said Linda would try to pull me into an emotional fight, because that is where Linda felt strong. When I ended the call, I stood in the sunlight behind the warehouse and felt something shift inside me. It was not excitement. It was not victory. It was a steady feeling, like a lock clicking into place. For the first time, someone in the family was speaking like my father's life mattered and like my questions were normal. That afternoon, I went back to work and finished my tasks like always. I checked exits. I wrote my notes. I corrected small problems before they grew. And in the back of my mind, I kept building the timeline, piece by piece, not with anger, but with intention. The next week, I took a morning off work and went to the county building downtown. It was one of those old public buildings with hard floors and signs taped to the walls. People sat in rows of plastic chairs, holding folders and looking tired. I stood in line at a counter under a small glass window and waited my turn. When I reached the front, I kept my request simple. I said I was trying to confirm property history for an old address connected to my family. I said I needed the public record timeline, nothing more. The clerk did not ask why. She had the face of someone who has heard every type of reason. She asked for the address, my name, and a small fee. I paid, then stepped aside while she worked at a computer behind the glass. I watched her screen from a distance. I could not read it clearly, but I could see the way she clicked through a sequence of pages. She paused at one point and leaned closer, like she was checking a detail. Then she printed something and placed it on a tray. She slid it toward me without expression and told me the results were what the county had on file. I did not open the papers at the counter. I thanked her and walked to a bench by the wall. I sat down and took a slow breath. Then I looked. It was not a dramatic document. It was a public record summary. It showed dates and names connected to the address. The important part was not any single line. It was the timing. The changes around that house did not look slow or natural. They looked fast. They looked like someone wanted control in a hurry. I kept my face neutral even though my hands felt cold. I did not want anyone watching me to notice. In places like that, people notice emotion before they notice truth. I folded the papers carefully and placed them back in my folder. Then I wrote notes in my notebook in plain language. I wrote the dates. I wrote what the clerk called the form. I wrote the office number. I wrote down the next place I might need to contact based on the labels I saw. On the way out, I stopped at another counter and asked a general question about how to request older related files. The person there told me the process, but warned me it could take time. I said time was fine. I had lived with missing pieces for years. A few weeks did not scare me. Outside, the air felt sharper than the building's stale smell. I sat in my car and looked at my notes. I was not trying to create a fight. I was trying to create a clean chain of facts. The more I did this, the less I felt like a confused teenager. I felt like an adult handling a problem the proper way. That afternoon, I went back to work and kept my routine steady. The warehouse was loud, and the noise helped in a strange way. It made my thoughts move slower. I walked the aisles and checked corners. I talked to a forklift driver about a blind spot near a rack. I asked maintenance to mark a slick area on the floor. Nobody in that building cared about my family history. They cared about pallets and schedules and safety numbers. That was comforting. In the break room, Trent noticed my folder and asked what I was doing. I told him I had appointments for a home loan. He smiled and said he was surprised I could even qualify, then added that it must be nice to have those benefits. His tone suggested I did not deserve anything. I did not react. I said I had worked for everything I had. Then I went back to my corner table and finished my coffee. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and made my folders cleaner. I created one folder on my laptop for the house timeline and another for the loan process. Inside the timeline folder, I made subfolders by year. I did not put dramatic labels on anything. I kept names and dates. I saved screenshots of the family group messages. I saved my bank checklist. I saved a photo of the county building receipt. I wrote down every phone call I made with the date and time, like a simple log. Some people might think that is excessive. To me, it is how you protect yourself when someone tries to rewrite your reality. If you can point to dates, you do not have to argue. You can stay calm because your calm is supported by structure. The next day, I met with Ms. Chen at her office. Carol had helped me get her contact. The building was modern and quiet. The waiting room had a water dispenser and a few framed certificates on the wall. I did not stare at them. I did not want to be impressed by decoration. I wanted help from someone who respected process. Ms. Chen greeted me with a steady tone. She asked me to explain what I needed. I told her about the VA loan path and the bank's checklist. I told her about Linda's refusal. I told her about the family narrative that my father left nothing. I kept my voice even and my words simple. I did not add extra emotion. I let the facts speak. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked questions that made me feel seen in a practical way. She asked what year my father was gone. She asked my age at the time. She asked if there was any formal paperwork I had ever been shown. I told her I had never been shown anything. I told her the house locks changed quickly and my father's items disappeared from sight. I told her I was put out at 19. I told her I was not trying to punish anyone. I told her I wanted the truth and I wanted to handle it through proper channels. Ms. Chen said the right approach was to stop relying on family stories and rely on official records. She explained that some military files can be routine and easy to request, while others can be limited and require specific steps. She told me not to interpret silence as proof of nothing. She said silence can mean many things. She also told me not to warn Linda about what I was doing. She said people who control a story often try to control the process too. She gave me a list of agencies and offices that commonly handle records and benefits questions. She explained which ones were connected to service history and which ones were connected to financial programs. She also explained that the best way to protect myself was to keep my requests clean and consistent. She said the system responds better when you are clear and patient. I did not ask her to show me anything on the spot. I did not ask for dramatic predictions. I asked what my next step was. She said the next step was to request the record properly and keep my evidence organized. She said if anything unusual appeared, we would respond in a formal way, not in an emotional way. When I left her office, I felt lighter, not because I had answers, but because I had a path. For years, Linda's confidence had made me doubt my questions. Ms. Chen treated my questions as normal. That alone was a form of relief. That evening, Linda posted again in the family group chat. She wrote about family unity and respect. She praised Kyle for being reliable. She added a comment about how some people pretend to be responsible, but still carry resentment like a hobby. She did not use my name. She never needed to. I saved the message and moved on. Kyle sent a separate message to the group, making a joke about how people should not show up asking for old benefits they did not earn. A couple of relatives reacted with laughing icons. I did not reply. I did not argue with icons. I saved that, too. Over the next few days, Linda called twice. I did not answer. I let the calls go to voicemail. Her messages were short and sharp. She told me I was being disrespectful by ignoring her. She told me I was trying to start trouble. She told me she had protected the family for years, and I should not confuse people with my questions. I saved each voicemail and wrote down the time it came in. At work, I stayed steady. I did not share what I was doing. I did not want opinions. I did not want sympathy. I wanted clean progress. When I had lunch breaks, I made small calls and wrote small notes. I requested one piece of information at a time. I kept copies of confirmation emails. I kept receipts for every fee. Every time I completed a step, I checked it off on my own list, the same way I check safety hazards on the warehouse floor. Mara asked how the loan process was going. I told her it was moving, but the record step might take time. She said the house I liked could still be there if we were careful. She said if I needed to adjust timing, she could work around it. She did not push me. That made me trust her more. One afternoon, after a long shift, I came home and found a plain envelope in my mailbox. It was not from Linda. It was not from the bank. It was a simple confirmation tied to a records request. It did not give me answers. It simply confirmed that my request existed in the system and that a response would come through the proper channel. I set the envelope on my table and stared at it for a moment. It was a small thing, but it meant my father was no longer just a story in Linda's mouth. He was a person in a file system that did not depend on her approval. Over the next week, more small confirmations arrived. Appointment notices, reference numbers, short emails that said my request had been received. I kept everything in one folder, and I backed it up twice. I started to sleep better, not because I felt safe, but because I felt organized. I also noticed something else. The more I stayed quiet, the more Linda and Kyle got loud. It was like they could sense they were losing control, even if they did not know why. Linda's messages became more frequent. Kyle's jokes became sharper. They tried to pull me into a public reaction that they could use. I did not give them that. I kept my tone plain in the rare moments I responded to practical questions. I did not explain my actions. I did not ask for permission. I focused on systems. I focused on the steps. By the end of that month, my folder had weight to it, not because it contained a dramatic secret, but because it contained structure. Dates, requests, confirmations, notes. The kind of quiet material that makes a story harder to twist. One night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and my calendar in view. I looked at the upcoming weeks and aligned my work schedule with the appointments I had secured. I placed the folder in my bag and set my keys next to it. Then I turned off the lights and went to bed with a steady mind, ready to keep moving forward through the process, one step at a time. The week before my VA appointment, my life became very quiet on the outside and very busy on the inside. I still went to work, I still did my rounds, I still smiled when people expected a smile. But every night I came home and followed my checklist like it was a second job. I did not treat it like a secret mission. I treated it like paperwork that needed respect. That mindset kept me calm. Mara called me after lunch one day. She said the seller was asking for a clearer timeline. She said the house was still available, but they wanted to know when my loan could close. I told her I had a VA appointment date and I was waiting on record confirmation steps. I told her I did not want to rush and make mistakes. She said she understood and that she could keep the seller steady if I kept her updated. Mara was the first person in this process who did not act like my father's name was a problem. She treated it like a normal part of a normal loan. At work, Trent noticed I was taking more careful notes than usual. He said I was acting like I expected trouble. I told him I liked to stay organized. He asked if I was going to fight the bank if they did not approve me. I told him I was not fighting anyone. I was following steps. He laughed and said steps were for people who needed permission. I did not answer. People like Trent want a reaction they can repeat later. Silence gives them nothing to carry. Linda, on the other hand, kept sending words she could carry. She called twice a day for 3 days. When I did not answer, she sent messages. She said I was being rude. She said I was trying to confuse the family. She said I was acting like a victim to get attention. Then she switched tones and said she was worried about me. She said she hoped I was not being influenced by outsiders who did not understand family. It was the same pattern I remembered from being 19. First pressure, then concern, then pressure again. Kyle joined in like it was a sport. He posted in the family group chat about loyalty and respect. He wrote that real men handle life without needing old stories. He wrote that some people chase paperwork because they have nothing else. A few relatives reacted with laughing icons again. I did not respond. I saved every message and moved it into the right folder. I did it without emotion, the same way I file a work report. If someone tries to twist your reality, clean records are your best protection. Aunt Carol called me one evening after dinner. Her voice sounded careful. She asked how I was holding up. I told her I was fine and that the process was moving. She asked if Linda was making noise. I said she was doing what she always does when she feels control slipping. Carol went quiet, then said she remembered my father being the kind of man who hated noise. She said he believed in systems because systems do not need a loud voice. She told me to keep going and to not argue in group chats. She said Linda knows how to win social games, but she cannot win against procedure if you stay patient. The next morning, I met Ms. Chen again. I brought my folder and my notebook. I did not bring anger. I brought dates. Ms. Chen looked at my notes and said I had done exactly what she would have advised. She said consistency matters. She said it is harder to dismiss someone who stays calm and keeps facts straight. She asked me what I wanted most from all of this. I told her I wanted 2 things. I wanted my home loan to move forward, and I wanted the truth about my father's service to stop being controlled by people who never respected him. Ms. Chen explained the next steps in plain language. She said my VA appointment could lead to one of 2 paths. It could be routine, or it could require special handling. She told me not to guess which one it was until I sat in that office. She also told me to prepare for family pressure if anything official came back unusual. She said some people panic when they realize a story can be checked. I told her I already saw that panic in Linda's behavior. Ms. Chen said that was important to notice and that I should not react to it in public. Before I left, Ms. Chen asked if I had any upcoming events where Linda liked to gather people. I said there was always something. Linda loved public moments. She loved birthdays, anniversaries, and any reason to take photos. Ms. Chen told me to be careful. She said I did not need to confront anyone yet. She said timing matters and calm timing protects you. I told her I understood. I did not say more than that. I was not going to perform confidence. I was going to stay steady. 2 days later, a message came in the family group chat that made the pattern clear. Linda announced a family appreciation banquet at the community hall, the same place as the last event. She wrote it like she was doing something kind. She said it was important to honor the people who held the family together through hard years. She said she wanted everyone there. Then she added a small line that felt like a pin. She said it would be nice if certain people could show gratitude instead of digging up the past. Again, she did not use my name, so she did not need to. The line was aimed at me like a quiet spotlight. Kyle replied and said the banquet would be a good chance to remind everyone who actually showed up for the family. He added a joking comment about people who appear only when they want something. Brianna reacted with a simple symbol, not laughter, not support, just something neutral. That was her safe place. I read the chat once and set my phone down. I sat at my kitchen table and looked around my apartment. The room was small, the lights were warm, everything I owned had a place. I realized I had been living like a man who expected to be pushed out again. I kept things light. I kept things easy to carry. Even my home felt temporary because my past taught me to stay ready to leave. That thought bothered me more than Linda's message. It showed me how deep her control had reached. That night, I made a choice that felt simple but heavy. I decided I would go to the banquet, not to argue, not to demand anything, just to be present as myself, calm and steady. If Linda wanted a room full of witnesses to her story, I would not hide from it. I would not beg to be included, but I would not erase myself either. I did not tell anyone that decision. I just wrote the date on my calendar and left it there like a fact. In the days that followed, I tightened my routine. I took 1 day off work for the VA appointment. I informed my manager early and kept the reason simple. I said it was a loan meeting. He approved it without questions. I adjusted my shifts and finished my tasks ahead of time so no one could complain that I was slacking. At home, I checked my folder again and again, not because I was nervous, but because repetition calms me. I labeled everything clearly. I backed it up on 2 separate drives. I printed a small 1-page timeline for myself with key dates, just so I could speak clearly if someone asked. It did not include emotional details. It included basic events and the dates they happened. I also wrote down the names of the offices I had contacted and the reference numbers I received. It looked like boring paperwork. That was the point. Linda kept calling. One evening, she left a voicemail that sounded softer than the others. She said she did not understand why I was shutting her out. She said she raised me too, and she deserved respect. She said my father would not want me to tear things apart. I listened once, then saved it like the rest. Her words tried to pull me back into the role of the teenager who needed her approval. I was not that person anymore. Brianna called me late one night, which surprised me. Her voice was quiet. She said Linda was upset and that Kyle was making jokes again. She said she wished things could be normal. I told her I wanted normal too. I told her I was not trying to hurt anyone. I told her I was trying to finish a home loan and request records the proper way. She asked why I did not just let it go like everyone else. I told her some things do not heal when you ignore them. I told her I needed the truth, even if it was simple, because a lie sitting in the middle of a family spreads into everything. Brianna did not argue. She did not apologize either. She just said she hoped I was being careful. I told her I was. We ended the call politely. It was not a warm moment, but it was real. For the first time, she sounded like a person, not a background voice repeating Linda's lines. The day before my VA appointment, I laid out my clothes the same way I do before an important work inspection. Simple, clean, and respectful. I packed my folder. I charged my phone. I put my keys and wallet in the same spot by the door. Then I sat on my couch with the lights low and let myself breathe. I thought about my father, not as a rumor, but as the man I remembered in small moments. His steady mornings, his quiet repairs, his habit of leaving notes on the counter. I thought about how Linda turned his absence into a tool. I thought about how the town accepted her version because it was easy. Then I thought about myself at 19, walking down those porch steps with bags in my hands, hearing the lock behind me. I did not feel anger. I felt something clearer. I felt like I was finally doing what I should have done years ago, with the resources and calm I did not have back then. I was not going to fight with words. I was not going to plead for kindness. I was going to handle things properly, the right way, through the systems people pretend to respect when it benefits them. When I went to bed that night, I did not scroll the family chat. I did not check for new messages. I set my alarm, turned off the light, and let the quiet settle. I drove to the VA office early because I do not like rushing. The building was clean and quiet. The lobby had rows of chairs and a small desk where people checked in. Most of the faces looked tired, but calm. I sat down with my folder on my knees and kept my eyes on the wall clock. When my name was called, I followed a staff member down a hallway that smelled like old paper and floor cleaner. I was led into a small office with a desk, 2 chairs, and a filing cabinet. Mr. Patel introduced himself and asked for my identification. I handed it over, then opened my folder and placed my papers in a neat stack. At first, it felt routine. He typed, checked a screen, and asked basic questions. He asked why I needed the records. I told him it was for a home loan, and the bank asked for service-related verification connected to my father's name. He nodded like he had heard that many times. Then he opened a file on his screen and stopped moving for a moment. He leaned closer. His eyes focused on one section like he was making sure he was reading it correctly. He did not speak right away. He looked at me, then looked back at the screen. He stood up from his chair, walked to the door, and closed it. He turned the lock. It was a small click, but it changed the air in the room. Then he sat back down slower than before. His voice lowered. He said my father's service file was restricted. He said it was not the kind of record that gets handled at a front counter. He said there were special notes attached to it. He said there was also a compensation package connected to the file, and it had been waiting because the next of kin line was never properly resolved. I kept my face calm. Inside, my body went still. It felt like all the noise in my head turned off at once. For years I had been told there was nothing. Now a federal office was telling me there was something official, and it was not small. Mr. Patel asked me if I had ever been contacted about any of this. I told him no. I told him I was told my father left nothing behind. Mr. Patel nodded once, like he was matching my words to what he was seeing. He then said the amount connected to the package. He did not say it loudly. He said it like a professional who knows numbers can cause panic. The number was more than anything I had ever held, and more than anything Linda ever acted like existed. It was the kind of amount that turns a family story into a legal problem. I did not celebrate, I did not cry, I did not ask him to repeat it. I only asked what the next step was. He explained the process in plain terms. He said I would need to complete a set of forms. He said the restricted part meant certain details would be handled through a controlled route, but the benefits and compensation path was clear if I provided the right proof of identity and relationship. He said I should speak with a benefits specialist and, if possible, an attorney who understood estate and benefits overlap. He said the file notes suggested prior handling that did not match normal procedure. I thanked him. I asked for the list of next steps and the reference numbers. He printed a few pages and placed them in a folder with an official cover sheet. He told me where to go next in the building. He unlocked the door and walked me out. In the hallway, I took a slow breath. My legs felt steady, but my mind felt like it was catching up to reality. I sat in the waiting area again and looked at the folder on my lap. It did not feel like a prize. It felt like proof that my whole life had been shaped by a lie. I followed the next steps that same day. I met with a benefits specialist in another office. I provided what they asked for. I signed what they needed. The words on the pages were formal and dense, but the meaning was simple. Something had been waiting. I was the person who could finally unlock it. When I left the building, I sat in my car and did not start the engine right away. I looked at my phone and saw missed calls from Linda, 3 in a row, then a message from Kyle in the group chat, making another joke about people chasing paperwork. I did not reply. I saved everything. Then I called Ms. Chen. Ms. Chen got me into her office the next morning. I handed her the VA folder and watched her read without interrupting. Her face stayed controlled, but her posture changed. She asked a few direct questions and wrote notes with quick strokes of her pen. She told me the situation was bigger than a home loan. She said this was a benefits and estate issue with official restrictions, which often means there are reasons the file is handled carefully. She said we would not guess those reasons. We would follow the documented process. She prepared the filings that needed to be prepared. She also prepared formal notices that needed to go to the correct parties. She told me something else in a calm voice. She said that if someone misrepresented themselves to control benefits or property linked to a service member, institutions do not treat it like family drama. They treat it like a compliance issue. She said that meant my best move was to remain steady and let the system do its work. I asked her if I should warn Linda. Ms. Chen said no. She said warnings help people hide, delay, or rewrite. She said the point of procedure is that it does not ask for permission. 2 days later, the family banquet arrived. The community hall looked the same as before, bright lights, white tablecloths, a microphone on a small stage. Linda loved that room because it made her look like a leader. I arrived on time. I wore simple clothes. I carried a plain folder, nothing flashy. I walked in and scanned the room like I do at work, noting exits and corners out of habit. Linda stood near the front with her practiced smile. Kyle was close to her, moving like he owned the space. Brianna stood a little behind them, watching faces more than decorations. Aunt Carol was there too, sitting near the side, hands folded, eyes steady. Linda spotted me, and her smile tightened for half a second. Then she recovered and greeted me like nothing was wrong. She said the night was about gratitude and unity. I nodded and moved to a back table. The event started the way Linda wanted. She greeted people. She posed for photos. She directed the room with small hand motions like an invisible conductor. When the time came for speeches, Linda stepped up and talked about hard years and strong people. She praised Kyle for being dependable. She talked about loyalty without saying anyone's name, but her eyes moved toward my table more than once. Kyle followed her tone and made it sharper. He spoke about showing up for family and not digging into the past. He spoke like he was protecting something. People clapped because clapping is easier than thinking. When the clapping faded, Linda looked toward me and asked if I wanted to say something too. She framed it like generosity, but it was a trap. If I refused, she could say I was ungrateful. If I reacted emotionally, she could say I was unstable. I stood up calmly. I did not raise my voice. I did not insult anyone. I spoke in simple facts, the way I had practiced. I said I was buying a home, and the bank asked for records. I said I requested my father's military records through the proper route. I said the VA confirmed his file is restricted and connected to a compensation package that has been waiting for years. I said the official process is now active, and my attorney is handling the correct filings. I said I would not debate family stories in public, because institutions do not operate on stories. They operate on records. The room went quiet in a way I had never heard in that hall. Not angry quiet. Not awkward quiet. It was the quiet of people realizing a long-running story might have been staged. Linda's face changed. Her smile did not fit her eyes anymore. Kyle's posture stiffened like his body understood danger before his mind did. Brianna looked at Linda, then at me, then down at the table like she was finally seeing the shape of the past. Linda tried to respond with her usual tone, the one that makes neighbors feel safe. She said she did what she had to do. She said she held the family together. She said I was misunderstanding things. Miss Chen had warned me this would happen, so I did not argue. I did not trade words. I only opened my folder and placed one official notice on the table, face down, then slid it toward Linda so she could pick it up herself. It was not a dramatic gesture. It was a procedural one. The notice was addressed properly. It had reference numbers. It described the review steps now in motion and the requirement for certain parties to respond through official channels. Linda's hand shook as she lifted it. Her eyes moved across the page quickly, then slowed as she reached the middle. The confident host look drained from her face. Kyle leaned closer to read, then pulled back like the paper was hot. No one laughed, no one clapped, no one moved toward the stage anymore. The room felt like it had turned from a party into a waiting area. Linda looked around as if she expected someone to rescue her with a friendly comment. Nobody did. Carol stayed still, watching Linda with a tired patience that looked like years of swallowed words. I picked up my coat from the chair. I did not announce anything. I did not give a final speech. I simply walked toward the exit at the same steady pace I use at work. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape and a low wave of whispering start. Not loud enough to form a new story yet, but loud enough to show the old one was breaking. I stepped outside into the cool night air, pulled my keys from my pocket, and drove away, while the hall stayed full of people staring at a paper that was finally louder than Linda's voice.